Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm really excited about the conversation today with our guest, Reed Birney. Reed, thank you so much for being here, being part of this.
Great to be here.
And yeah, so these sessions, for anyone new, we've been doing a couple of these and hope to do more. But these live sessions, one of the things we've been using these for is for one actor to kind of dive a little bit deeper on one role. So we have a little bit more time to just talk about that one character and approaches, concerns, challenges, things like that. And since we're live here on Facebook, I will do my best to kind of monitor the chat and things like that to bring in any questions or comments any of those watching have. So let me introduce very quickly our guest for those who might be unfamiliar with Reed's full body of work. I mean, I won't go through the whole thing, but he has done quite a bit. I will say, he is a Tony winner for The Humans. He's also a Tony nominee for Casa Valentina. You can see him in the new film Mass, HBO's Succession, and Apple's Home Before Dark. But why we're here, and before all of that happened in Reed's life, Reed played Uncle Vanya in Chekhov's play at SoHo Rep in New York. And so that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the character of Uncle Vanya and anything that you remember and things like that. But what I wanted to start with is, a lot of people think about these types of playwrights, whether it's Shakespeare or Chekhov or Pinter, and you start to think about, well, there must be there's a style to this, or there's a way to play it. And so I was curious, if you can recall, what did you have in your head about doing Chekhov coming into that production I'll follow it up from there, but why don't we start from that point?
Well, I've only done 2 Chekhov plays, and Vanya was the second of the 2. Mm-hmm. Before that, I had done The Cherry Orchard at Williamstown in 2004, I believe, which was, way too fast. All those summer stock things or 2 weeks rehearsals, but it was a beautiful production, but a much more traditional production. It was, period costumes and high button shoes and mm-hmm. all that stuff. So I had some experience and some sense of what Chekhov was going to be. But when we got around to doing Uncle Vanya, mm-hmm. Annie Baker and Sam Gold had this notion in their head. They said, why is it when you sit around your living room reading mm-hmm. Chekhov and eating chili and drinking beer, why are they so much more interesting than when you go to see them in the theater and people are parading around with parasols and, mm-hmm. All that stuff? Is there a way to have a production be as lively and vital as it is in your living room? Mm-hmm. and have it be fully rehearsed and all that. So Annie set about to create a translation that was completely American, modern, mm-hmm. still set in Russia. We still had samovars. We didn't update it. There were no cell phones. It was the play, but as if we were alive then. Now. Okay. Does that make sense? I think you know what I mean. It's to make it as contemporaneous as possible.
Right.
I know that she struggled with the famous word that Astroff says most people are, and it's usually fools mm-hmm. or idiots. And that never felt right to Annie. So she had a literal translation from a woman who spoke completely fluent Russian. And then she did her Annie Baker thing on top of it. And so what she came up with was the closest equivalent in our language to what she thought Chekhov was trying to say with his Russian mm-hmm. word, to which there is no direct translation, was creeps. Most people are creeps. And that means a very specific thing to us.
Sure, yeah.
In America. But she thought that was the right word. Anyhow, that sort of informed the style of our production. The audience was on benches, not even benches, they were like platforms. There were no chairs. They were carpeted, shag carpeted. And so people were sort of sitting around like they would be in a living room. And there were some chairs for people that couldn't sit Indian style.
Yep.
So we really approached it as if it were a modern play.
Hmm.
I think it's always useful, honestly, to not torture yourself with the idea of a style. There is a style. Of course, there's a style. There's a style to Restoration Comedy and Noel Coward and all of those things. But I think the starting point, the jumping off place, has to be telling the truth. For that character. And then I think the style that you put on top of it is perhaps the morals and manners and constraints of the day, of the time period, that would affect the character's behaviors. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So was there anything that you were nervous about going into the production?
Yeah, I was just nervous about the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Doing Chekhov in New York, and it was a big stinking part, and Annie had written it for me.
Yeah.
For some reason, she and Sam were sitting around at one point, maybe during Circle Mirror Transformation, and thought, you know who Reed is? He's Uncle Vanya. He's a cranky old guy. When I was in college at Boston University, I remember somebody brought up Uncle Vanya, as they are wont to do in college.
Sure.
And I remember looking at it and thinking, well, there's nothing for me in that play. They're all old. And I never ever thought about it. I never thought about playing Uncle Vanya.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there it was. And in fact, I was already a little old for it. He says he's 47.
Right.
And I think I was 54.
Okay.
And I did it. And they made me shave my head, I think, to get rid of all my gray hair, so that I could, my baby face could perhaps pull off the 47-year-old thing.
And so were there particular things that either you discovered, I mean, the discovery is kind of in a couple ways, discovered about the part and or discovered about yourself, in terms of connecting with it as you started working on it, and even maybe in the performances?
I'm sure there were many things. Some of the things that sort of popped to mind are, those plays, he calls those plays comedies. And, there have been endless books written and conversations had about what's funny about them. Everybody's so miserable.
Yeah.
But I think he meant comedy. I think he meant literally comedies, but I also think he meant the human comedy, just the follies and foibles of mankind, because those plays certainly showcase that. How we get so caught up in our own navel gazing and inability to sort of see beyond ourselves. And that was very useful for me to sort of see if, in fact, Annie and Sam thought I was Uncle Vanya. What about me made them feel that way? So it was good for me to sort of see how poor Vanya really spinning his wheels, so tortured. Some of it real, but a lot of it of his own despair.
Sure.
His inability to connect with Yelena and his dreams not having come true. I think everybody can relate to that.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Were there points when you looked back, even at 54 or whatever it was, points in your 20s or 30s or 40s where you could very specifically identify with some of the things Vanya was going through in terms of Europe? Yeah.
Sure. If you decided to be an actor in New York in your 20s, you are full of hopes and dreams and wild aspirations, which I think Vanya certainly has had. Right. I think like me and like a lot of people, I think suddenly Vanya found himself middle-aged and none of those dreams had come true.
Right.
And he was completely bewildered about how that happened. where was I when my life happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he's working the farm and he's taking care of people, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, wait a minute, what
Right.
did I get out of this?
Right. Right. And then, you know, of course, like the climax, or, you know, one of the climaxes of the play is that the professor's, he's planning to sell the farm, right? Isn't that what he's, yeah. So it's just like this thing I've spent my life working towards, assuming is going to be mine. Nothing. Like, what do I get for this?
I'm literally being kicked out.
Yeah.
With no thought as to my feelings or where I'm going to go, which is, I think, Vanya's biggest nightmare, is that he has been unconsidered.
Right, right. Now, do you feel like you understood either the character or the play a little bit better at the age you were than if you had been, you know, age right for the part, or in your early 40s, you know, if it had been 10 years earlier? Do you know,
who knows, Nathan? I'm sure being 6 or 7 years older than the character, I would like to think that I had learned some things in those 6 or 7 years past 47.
Right.
But I think by the time I was 47, I probably could have brought, you know, that life experience.
Because I mean, for you, like your career trajectory, I mean, I know you've often mentioned the play Blasted, which was before this. And had you done that? About how old were you when you did Blasted? Do you remember?
I was, well, wait a minute. Vanya was 2012.
Yeah.
So I was 50. I was older than that. I was 10 years older than Vanya.
Okay.
I was 57 or 58. I was 54 when I did Blasted.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So, you know, you had seen your own kind of career, you know, not go maybe in the direction that you had thought in your 20s it was going to go. Sure. And then suddenly, you know, unlike Vanya, you know, things do change for you, and you've been on a really nice trajectory since then. And so, you know, it must have been just very interesting for you personally to kind of see those two different lives of, like, you know, what would Reed's life have been if he hadn't done Blasted, if it had scared him too much to do it. And, you know,
well, I know we wouldn't be talking today. Well, that much I know. I can safely say, oh, sure. You know, I mean, how often do we think, you know, what might have been?
Sure.
I was, you know, in my 50s, and the role I had played just before Blasted, I'd had 7 lines, and it wasn't a terribly good play, and it was not a very good part. And I really thought, oh, it's over. This is the best I can get at this very late date in my career.
Right.
Why would I presume to think that anything is going to happen from here? And so it was one of those real miracles that I think has given a lot of people hope. I feel like I'm a little bit the poster boy for perseverance.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that, because I think perseverance is really essential.
Yeah.
But I lived long enough struggling, and I struggle still, you know. I mean, it's not like I'm Tom Hanks wandering around town turning those things down. But I remember very clearly the despair that followed me for most of my life.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly that's not necessarily something that people want to spend time in remembering, that kind of stuff, but seems very pertinent when approaching a character like Vanya. You know.
Well, I would venture to say it's very pertinent for almost any character ever written.
I guess so.
Isn't that the human condition? Lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah. This isn't turning out how I thought, you know. I mean, yeah, just basically that's the subtext of almost everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's essential to know that, and to know what that is, and to sort of embrace it is too strong a word, but to acknowledge it, and to recognize that is a a big part of the human condition.
Yeah. So, so once you start getting into rehearsals, and certainly this might apply to other plays you've done subsequently, or even film or TV work, but how do you trust the script? And certainly in this case, it was a new translation, but how do you trust the script and then also trust yourself in terms of some of the choices you're making?
That's an interesting question, Nathan. I think what it is, I think, I say this all the time to my students, but I don't think there's any place for fear on stage, honestly. You can be as scared as you want in the dressing room and throw up and all that stuff. But once you walk on stage, you have to be absolutely certain that you belong there and that you deserve to be there. I did a thing in the Cherry Orchard when I was playing Gaev, in the opening scene when they first arrive home, where Gaev, who's really a kind of a foolish character, was sort of going on and on about this sideboard, this cupboard, this beloved cupboard.
Yep.
And the doors were open. And one day in rehearsal, I was rhapsodizing about the cupboard, and I sort of went up to the cupboard and closed the doors around me. They were curved.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it sort of, and I thought, holy cow, that's fantastic. Where'd that come from? And a couple of other people in the play were like, that was unbelievable. What an amazing sort of, somebody called it a coup de théâtre. And the director wouldn't let me do it. And I never understood why. He said, yeah, don't do that. I thought, wow, that says everything you need to know about who that guy is.
Right.
He's out of his mind. But he didn't like it. So I didn't do it.
Right.
And that was a choice I thought was dead on.
Right.
And then the director, who's a wonderful director, Michael Greif, and it was a wonderful production, didn't want it for whatever reason.
Yeah. So has it been looking back, do you feel like it's been a process? Do you feel like you started out with that kind of confidence on stage, or has it grown over time, just, or changed, over time in terms of that? I mean, obviously, I don't think we're talking about a sense of you never think you're doing anything wrong on stage, but just having that, the confidence to forge ahead and try things.
Yes. I think I always was inventive and free on stage in a good way. Yeah. I know that Joe Mantello, who directed The Humans and Casa Valentina, who is a fantastic director, he really is so grateful when actors bring in ideas. I think he finds it agony to have to spoon feed people.
Right.
Things, So if you come in as like, well, what if I flop on this couch?
Right.
And that's a starting place.
Right. He can at least say, well, maybe do it this way, or
the couch flopping is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
So he can then be an external eye and an editor.
Yeah.
And stuff. But so I do think that kind of inventiveness sounds a little bit like showing off and coming up with stuff for the sake of coming up. I'm just talking about being alive on stage and letting impulses happen.
And and especially in rehearsal, when that's what that time is for, just try to come up with stuff. And see what's going to work. I mean,
fun.
It sounded like, in your new film Mass, you guys had rehearsal time to think of things and try to come up with stuff. Right, exactly.
2 days, but it was enough. It was enough, especially since we spend the whole movie sitting at a table.
Yeah, exactly.
To come up with a lot of choreography.
There's no couch flopping in that film.
No couch flopping.
But and I think you bring up a really important point there. Is I think very often, and I definitely do it myself, is that directors seem like these untouchable, omnipotent figures that have all the answers and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's really important, like you just did, to humanize that role, that these are just people that yes, they're charged with that job, but they don't have all the answers. They don't know. They may not even know like what to do with a scene, and they're looking for your ideas.
That's right. I mean, and that's in the best of all worlds. That's the collaboration that you are seeking. But I have certainly worked with directors who do think they're God. Who there was one director who showed up the first day with all of the blocking written down. And now you cross over here and you sit in this chair.
Yeah.
I was like, well, why am I doing that?
Right.
Because I've written it down. He had been a soap opera director for 10 billion years. And so, this is
sure,
but was unable to listen to us and, be flexible and collaborative.
Right.
So there certainly are terrible directors, full of ego and full of, their own stuff that prevent you from doing that. In the best of all worlds, you're in a position where you can sort of suss that out before you take the job.
Yeah, exactly.
The job.
Right. Because, I mean, an audition, again, I think it's important for actors to remember, it's kind of a job interview on both sides,
Well, it's absolutely true. And a lot of people are not in the position to turn jobs down. They're like, I need a job.
Right.
I know this director's a jerk, but I'm going to need a job. So I'm going to do this crummy job anyway.
Right. Because it'll pay the bills, and I enjoy the material, but
my friend is in it, and I haven't worked in 2 years, and it's an okay part.
Yeah.
All the reasons people do stuff.
Of course. I'm curious. I know you brought up a point earlier about Annie looking for the right word in the script. Once you guys started rehearsal for Vanya, did the script change at all? Were you making suggestions as a cast? I don't know if you remember any of that.
Very little. It was, we had done a couple of workshops over the year or so beforehand. Most of the people that ended up doing the play got together and did these, day readings or 2-day readings. And Annie worked on it, but it didn't change very much. She pretty much knows what she's doing, what she wants. And, it's weird how some playwrights, it would never occur to you to say, what does this line mean? Or why am I saying that? And Annie's one of those. It just feels like it's not, you just don't want to do that. There's no reason to. And then other players like, this whole speech has got to go. I don't know what we're doing here. I say this 16 times. Please cut it.
Well, you hear those stories in films where somebody just like red pen right through them. No, we don't need to say any of this. We're cutting this whole thing.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now I found a quote as I was doing some research about this play and you doing it. There was a line in the New Yorker kind of talking about this production, and they were reflecting on a lot of the characters that you had played up to this point, and including Vanya, and looking at, I guess, maybe a number of different parts. They said, that your characters are trapped and they know it, and they're angry about it, even as they try to bury their resentment in silence. Does that resonate with you at all in terms of, some of the characters you've been playing?
Doesn't it resonate with you? I mean, Hilton Als wrote that, and I was like, holy cow, I feel like he's just had a look inside my brain.
Yeah.
I think I do know those guys. I know those guys who are trapped, and I felt trapped for many years. Maybe that's why I can do them. I think one of the things about Vanya is that he's so unhappy, and he's so unhappy that he's unhappy. He's fully aware that he's a miserable sod and doesn't know how to stop being a miserable sod. Would love to be not a miserable.
Right.
Just doesn't know how.
Yeah. Exactly. You see people that you're just like, God, they seem just so happy and light, and like, how do they do that?
Yeah. And as soon as you're like, starting tomorrow, I'm going to be happy, except that Elena doesn't love me. Right. Nah. There was a moment in rehearsal that happened that I feel like sort of defined Vanya for me. Early in the first scene of the play, I'm sort of pacing and ranting, very unpleasant. And there was an Entenmann's tea cake on the set.
Yep.
And the samovar.
Yeah.
And I'm ranting, and I got myself a cup of tea. Rah, 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 rah. And I got myself a piece of this crumb cake.
Yep.
And I sat down in the chair, and I'm ranting, and I'm shoving this thing into my mouth. And then I realized on this day of rehearsal that my front was completely covered with crumb. And so as I continued to rant, I picked all the crumbs off my sweater and stuck them in my mouth. And I thought, that's who Vanya is. He can't let it go. If there are crumbs, they're mine, and I'm going to eat them, damn it.
Yeah. Do you feel like, at least from the outside, looking at your career and the way, through Q&As and things like that, what do you feel like helped you transcend some of that potential resentment? Like you said, that kind of angriness about things not working out the way you want was something you could identify with. But, obviously resentment is something that can creep in. But did you feel like personally there was something that you found that helped you, kind of Aikido that into like, all right, I'm not gonna let it, be this. And
well, getting older and having my career do better, having children is a big thing, because suddenly you're aware of people other than yourself that you're maybe responsible for. But I will say, Nathan, winning a Tony doesn't hurt either. You know what I mean? I found
a little bit of validation.
Yeah. That really was like, okay, I used to be very aware of who did and didn't come see my plays, which of my friends didn't come. I didn't invite again. Those stupid emails, come see my play.
Right.
And once I got the Tony, I was like, I don't actually need anybody to come see my plays anymore. I've done 10 billion plays.
Yeah.
People have seen me. I felt like I didn't have to prove anything after that.
Yeah.
And so that actually was quite liberating. I know it sounds incredibly shallow, but that was the biggest takeaway for me from winning the Tony, is that I was sort of able to own my confidence.
Well, and I I'm not going to put this term on you, but the way I would view it, if I were in that position, is that it feels like acceptance on some level, and that is an extremely human, need. And so whether it's, in this case happened to be the Tony or something else, that it's just like, I feel accepted now. And of course,
even a better word than accepted is acknowledged. And I felt like I had that my work had some value.
Right.
And this is the thing, that I think was the source of my great sadness for many, many years. And for so many actors I know who are struggling, is they don't feel valued.
Yeah.
And, somebody could look at them and say, well, it's their ego. They're not, they want to show off and they're not given a place to show off. But it's not that. Because I had decades to sort of think about this. It's really about feeling that you have a point. There's a point to your life. There's, something that you are giving to people. It's a funny way, it's your ministry. And if you don't have anybody in the church, you're not doing anything. You're just talking into air.
Right. Now, I am curious. You brought up the staging of the play.
Yeah.
What was it like playing so close to the audience? That I'm sure you were very aware of the people the whole time. You know,
Yeah.
you could see them. So
Well, sometimes you'd have to step over their legs to cross the stage. It was thrilling. It was really thrilling and somewhat terrifying, but you know, you got used to it pretty quickly, and you were able to sort of build your own weird fourth wall. There would be times where a good friend would be in the very front row and literally be 2.5 feet from me.
yeah.
And I wouldn't realize they were there until the curtain call.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. You knew that people were there. I mean,
right. Of
obviously,
course. Yeah.
people were there, but my eyes were not good. I've had them fixed since then, but I didn't, and I wasn't wearing my glasses. And so I couldn't have seen them anyway.
And now, okay, so now this was before the Tony Award, but you know, it was almost like it's kind of like almost a little bit earlier. You didn't need, you didn't care who came to your play because you couldn't see them anyway. It didn't matter.
No, because if they didn't come, then they couldn't tell you afterwards how good they thought.
Right. Or the dreaded, like, you were having a lot of fun up there. That's
well, listen, yeah. The backstage phenomenon is really, you know, it's fascinating, the people that get mad at you if you don't give good backstage and then come to your play and give terrible backstage. So was
really
there have an obligation.
Yeah, I know. Was there anything about the, you know, a particular scene in the play that really challenged you? Like, I mean, I know there's obviously the moment we talked about when Vanya kind of learns what the professor's plan is and kind of loses it and attempts murder. But was there anything that you remember, like, really struggling, trying to figure out or get inside, or was the crumbs moment just kind of unlocked everything?
You know, there were a couple of things. There's Vanya's big monologue, his in the middle of the night in the second act. Mm-hmm. And we sort of struggled with, what is that? Who's he talking to? Mm-hmm. You know, it's this antique device of these asides to the audience. And that didn't feel right, to suddenly look at the audience and mm-hmm. say, you know, here's what I'm thinking.
Right.
And I know we struggled with that. And the thing we landed on was he is literally talking to himself, and not talking to himself as if he were a separate person. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, I'm thinking out loud. It really was, hey, you know what, Vanya, you got to think about this. Mm-hmm. And that sort of freed it up. It was also challenging because the audience was literally all the way around us. So, you know, you had to be very aware that you had to keep turning around the course of the thing to make sure people got included. And then the last scene of the play, where he's so broken and so full of heartbreak and despair. It was a little bit scary to go there, because I knew I had to go there. I knew it had to be that thing. Right. And you worry as the play is going on, knowing where you got to end up. Mm-hmm. Am I going to get there? Am I going to get there? I'm not feeling it so much tonight. Blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 shows where I didn't get there. Mm-hmm. But mostly I felt like I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think that's really interesting to think about that. You know, of course, because you as the actor are still present to the experience as the play is going on.
Yeah, you know what? It's a craft. It's this incredible paradox that, you know, we are living alive on stage, and yet at the same time we've rehearsed it for a month. Right. And I've done it 4 times already this week, and I've got to find a way to get here or here or here, you know. So it's both structured and unstructured. Mm-hmm. Within the structure, there is great freedom, but there's the structure.
Now,
I want to talk about a production of The Seagull that I saw.
Oh, great! Yeah,
with Vanessa Redgrave in London in probably 1982. Natasha Richardson was playing Nina, and it was the first time I'd ever seen her. she was okay. Nina's an impossible part. Doesn't really
Yeah.
make any sense. But Vanessa Redgrave, they usually play Arkadna, a sort of a very grave lady. And she was like a 14-year-old girl.
Hmm.
She was the scene where she's watching the play. I remember she did the thing that parents often do when they're watching their kids play. So they turn and they talk to their neighbor, and they, it's like, she couldn't let him have the attention.
Hmm.
And so she was, and then I remember she with Dragorin, she was just skipping around, and she was way too old and had way too much rouge on, but she was holding on desperately to this girlishness.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, the disconnect between this, 45-year-old woman behaving completely inappropriately, it was both heartbreaking and hilarious.
Hmm.
And so when you say these are comedies, it really was.
Right.
It was as funny as anything you ever saw.
Hmm.
So I think in the plays there is room for that.
Yeah.
I think there have been Vanyas that have been real buffoons.
Mm-hmm.
Mine wasn't. Mine was just full of rage and self-loathing.
Yeah.
But there are Vanyas, I think, that are real clowns.
So now I guess it would be, maybe almost 10 years, almost 10 years since you've done Vanya. Are there other characters in the Chekhov canon that, you're just like, I never looked at this play as having anything for me, but now I'm curious about this part? Or
I think all that's left is Fears.
I think you're still a little young for Fears, Reed. Come on.
But I'm a little old for everything else. So I have that to look forward to. I don't know. I honestly never really thought about Chekhov. And I have loved both my experiences doing it, because I was with directors that really encouraged the naturalism of it, that they didn't want to impose some sort of 18th century
Right.
froofiness on it. So it could be a play in which my strengths were allowed to come to play. Cool. I think I mostly prefer modern contemporary plays for that reason. Though Chekhov, it's astonishing how modern he is even today.
Sure.
That you see, Astrov's whole thing about climate, you're just like, whoa, dude, we clearly have learned nothing in the last 150 years. Right.
Well, cool. Well, this has been a really fun conversation and look into Vanya. And I just have one more thing. What I've been doing now is what I'm calling the lightning round.
Okay.
And basically, I have 10 questions, and you're going to tell me if you like the first thing or the second thing. Which one do you like? So don't worry, not too much pressure. You've done great. I'm sure you're going to ace this too. Okay. So 10 questions. Here we go. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Mountains or the beach?
The beach.
Salty or sweet?
Sweet.
Okay. Sandwich or salad?
Sandwich.
Movie or concert?
Movie.
Early riser or night owl?
Both. Okay. Kind of both.
Spicy or mild?
Spicy.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
All right. And I threw in a couple New York ones here. Subway or walking?
I prefer to walk, but I, take the subway for convenience. But
okay.
Walking, yes,
okay. Yeah. And sometimes the dog's cat one can be very divisive, but this might be even more contentious. Pizza to fold or not to fold?
Oh, you mean to eat when you eat it?
Yes. Yeah.
It's funny, to fold, though I never do.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that that's an option.
Well, just think of those words, because as soon as I wrote that down, it reminds me of Hamlet. So to be or not to, just think of, yeah, just think of Hamlet every time you get pizza, and you're right, to fold or not to fold. Right, I can do this. All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, Reed, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And again, for those watching, please check out the film Mass if you have a chance. It is such a beautiful film on all levels.
Are there any questions people have? Anybody have any?
I haven't seen any come in, but I've been trying to bring them in, or I haven't seen any new ones come in. I've been trying to bring in, some as they've come up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the magic of trying to monitor, 14 screens.
Our genial host. Okay, yeah, there you go.
Mass is a fantastic film from first-time writer-director Franz Kranz. Is it?
Fran Kranz.
Fran Kranz, okay. But he's obviously been doing a lot in New York and theater, but his first film, it's great. The acting, the writing, cinematography, even, it's just beautiful. And
it'll be on video on demand on December 28th and on Hulu in March.
Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. You're keeping busy in other film and TV projects. People can see you and all these different streaming services and networks, and you pop up everywhere. So it's great. So, well, yeah, congrats on everything you're doing, and thanks so much for being here. So
happy holidays.
Yeah, I will wrap up the Facebook live feed now, and we'll see everybody another time.